This channel is supported by TrueFire. TrueFire is an online library of lessons from some of my favourite players. There's thousands of lessons on there. You can use the promo code JNC40 to get 40% off of any of their courses. I was watching a video yesterday and Ben Eunson, an amazing young-ish jazz guitar player, jazz fusion, he was talking about how he used to practice between 6 to 8 hours a day. And it made me think that this might be an interesting topic to talk about, because this has been a bit of a cultural meme, I think. Certainly remember back in the day that on sort of Guitar Techniques magazines and Total Guitar and stuff, you'd see things talking about Steve Vai's tantric practice sessions and stuff like this, and you'd think, well, how do these people have enough hours in the day to practice for 14 hours or whatever it is? And it all seems a little bit mystical, and I think it also is part of that mystique of the guitar idol, the prodigy who, you know, shuts himself away for however much time and then emerges from the fire like a phoenix or something like that. I guess the other side of that is that you can imagine that there's a chunk of folks that are like this, and might be more like me, that emerge from what is quite a lonely kind of existence, potentially shut away in a room practicing sweep picking for 4 hours a day, and then nothing ever happens, and then you wake up and you realise you're 30 and you're all right at sweep picking, but emotionally you're the age of a 14-year-old. Anyway, so I thought maybe this is something we could talk about, and talk about actually, I think, what is more practical and more practical ways of practicing. Is not to say that for a chunk of people, and even myself, there was a period of time where I did do a lot of practice. And so for instance, when I left my job in about 2015, 2016 to try and pursue being a full-time musician, and in the time where I wasn't working, I would sort of try and practice for a lot of time in the day, or create something. So I think this is another thing, you know, if you spend all of your time practicing, maybe you're neglecting another thing which might actually turn out to be more fruitful. If you were writing music, if you were creating sort of backing tracks, if you were somehow involving other people in your process, whether that might be, you know, sharing what you're working on with other folks, or going out and meeting other people, or, you know, yeah, all of these things which I think can count towards your sort of practice time because they're building other skills. Like, for instance, for me, I used to record hours and hours of music, and I think that's continued, obviously, and over time that becomes a process that you get better at and stuff like that. But anyway, what you read about with a lot of these folks is that at some point in their lives there was a time when they used to practice quite a lot. That seems to be the case for a lot of very poor people that ended up very successful on guitar, or very rich people that ended up very successful on guitar. So people that presumably got scholarships and stuff like that, and so were able to maybe practice for 8 hours a day. I think this is maybe not the reality for most of us. There was also a period sort of maybe 4 years ago where I watched a Ben Eunson or read a Ben Eunson interview, and I thought, right, well, let's try and really get good at this guitar thing. And I tried to make it a thing. I had like a timer on my phone, or like a productivity timer thing, like an app, and I tried to make like clock 7 hours a day of practice, you know, whether it was practicing technical stuff or whatever, or just holding a guitar and playing guitar, or working on a jazz standard or whatever it was. And eventually my wife got sick of it and said, can you actually spend some time with me? She wasn't my wife at the time, but she still is now. So there is like this balance thing that you've got to try and get right, I think. So instead of having these lofty goals of, you know, incredible amounts of time in the day, I think it's probably better to have a smaller goal that is actually achievable. And certainly as things progress in time, you know, you end up with a real job, or, you know, a real kid or something like that. And I think the window for practicing 8 hours a day gradually sort of closes, and maybe the real focus might be, okay, I want to try and do something every day. That's been what it is for me. And that started when I was about 14, actually. So I had to try and fit things in around school, skateboarding. I don't think I did much else. But so I would come home from school, I would skateboard for a bit, and then I would practice guitar for about 2 hours, then do my homework or exams or whatever it is I was working on. I think that was quite a good habit. It's not as unachievable as sort of 8 hours a day. And maybe it's something I want to try and get back to a little bit. One of the things that I used to do was sort of carve out a bit of time and say I need to practice the jazz standard that I'm working on for the week for 30 minutes every day. I think that was beneficial practice, because what that was also doing was making sure that I was sitting down with a guitar and being able to make music, whether it was just me playing with the guitar solo, or one of my favorite YouTube channels, Mr. Sunny Bass, which is a bass guitarist or double bass player who basically plays the bass line so that you can jam along. Really, really great channel. If you're interested in jazz at all, I would encourage you to try that. Playing with a double bass only is a really good thing to be able to do. I think it's good practice for like duo playing or all that sort of stuff. The other thing I found is, so when you see me doing these either lick or chord videos, that is my way of sharing something that grabbed my interest for a bit. And I think certainly for me now, or maybe even for you, if you've got a family or a job or whatever, it's not always possible to learn entire pieces of music necessarily. So taking these little bite-sized chunk things, so that's what it is for me. Like, it's a lick which I can learn in a small window of time, whether it's sort of 10, 15 minutes. And then I could take that across a couple of practice sessions and try and build up speed in that thing. I think these little smaller tasks, you know, whether it's a Charlie Parker lick, whether it's a Jack Gardner lick, these things can be really cool to try and like keep your interest for a small amount of time. They don't need to occupy all your time, and you don't need to get too obsessive over them. You know, you could fit them in around normal life. I think that's, I think, quite a good way to look at this stuff, like not having these huge tasks, but, you know, you find a week this lick that you thought, oh, that sounds really cool. What's going on there? I'll try and break it down. Or, you know, you hear a jazz standard and you think, right, I'm going to work on that every day. So taking these smaller tasks and thinking about spreading them out over a week or something like that. I make sure that I play guitar every day that I can. Part of that obviously is for the channel as well, and you know, that's an improvisation thing, is what I've been working on every day for however many years now. But I also have these other things that I like to work on, and hopefully they're also semi-interesting, like whether it's a chord video or a lick lesson or something like that. Another thing that I found useful for inspiring some of this stuff, if you're interested, Truefire are a sponsor of the channel. I was watching a couple of nights ago when Lenny was out, I was watching Martin Taylor's course on jazz, and he talks about his process for learning from the ground up a standard. I might talk about that a bit later on as well, because I'm going to do the tune Body and Soul, which he also did. And I find listening to folks like that, like Martin Taylor, Robin Ford, some of these people, Andy Timmons, that are on Truefire, can be a really interesting way, because these are professional musicians that have probably gone through the phase of practicing all the time and are probably at a stage now where they practice slightly less, but they still can talk about the processes that they went through. So whether it's like, okay, I learn the chords first, then I try and strip that back to a bass line, and then I think of the melody, and then I try and play the melody with the bass line at the same time. It was just a really methodical, interesting way to put this together. So Truefire are a sponsor of the channel, as you're probably well aware, but I get access to all of their courses so that I can sort of pick out bits that interest me. And that Martin Taylor one, I've seen Martin play live in Bath, a really cool kind of jazz player, seasoned. I think he's got an MBE as well, and a Grammy, or Grammy nominated, something like that. But yeah, so that's really interesting for me, reading about or hearing and watching a guy talk about that stuff, in the same way that Ben Eunson talking about his practice sessions is cool, but Martin is actually showing you the things that he's done, which I think is useful. So yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Did you used to be a person who practices loads, or do you try and kind of fit it in around your life? Are you happy with where you're at practicing wise or not? For me, I'm going to try and get back in a little bit more practice time where it's just me. The Boss Katana Airs have been a thing where if I'm just downstairs with the dogs, I can put those on and you know, play along to an album or something, or try and play along to a bass line. That's been pretty cool. But I also want to get back to this thing of practicing a jazz standard every single day. So that's going to be an aim for me, I think, alongside the things that catch my interest and fancy each day. So whether that's like a little lick from Eric Johnson or whatever, you know, the things that you see me break down. I hope that's okay to share. I'll catch you in another video soon. Cheers for now.